Hello and welcome to UTI Swatantra. We're talking about investing, but more importantly, this is the end of the financial year 2018-19 and a new financial year begins, and this is always a good time, even apart from January where you make a lot of resolutions which you don't keep. It's always a good time to pick up the threads once again and look at where you should be investing and how do you really secure your future and keep your family and everyone around you safe. Now, the important thing is that wealth and creation of wealth or investing and saving can take many dimensions, but how many should you be looking at? So what we are going to do today is talk about the 5 mantras. We're going to bring it down to 5 points that you should be focusing on and keeping in mind as you go about your investing philosophy or strategy. And to help me do that are two accomplished professionals in the space, Kunal Ramnani from Varsha Investments and also a certified financial planner, and Siddhartha Rastogi from Ambit Capital, who comes from a much bigger world than financial planning and deals with a lot more money. So I'm sure your views will be most useful as well. Thank you both for joining me. So Siddhartha, tell me, investing is always a good thing to do. How do you, at this point of time, if you were assuming starting for the first time, where would you start?
So Govind, I will answer your question in a little different manner. Let me narrate a very short story. A worried man in the middle of a moonless night came running on the banks of the river. There was a boat which had oars. He sat on the boat. There was no oarer, there was no rower. And he started rowing aggressively. It was middle of the night, he didn't realize, and he kept rowing without realizing for how many hours he has rowed already. Because of his fatigue and tiredness, he went off to sleep. Woke up in the morning and he was still on the shore. He rowed and oared entire night and still he was on the shore. Because he forgot one very simple thing. He didn't pull the anchors. And this is exactly what happens in financial planning. Everybody decides that we need to do something with our money. But we really don't know what should be done. And there is a very famous saying, any plan without a goal is just mere a wish. And any plan without a goal is mere a wish, whilst any goal which doesn't have a plan is just a task. So which essentially means you keep ending up doing things but not arriving at your goal post. So what one should do is start from the family first, always. So 5 things, very simple. First, the people you care most about. So start from there. Your immediate family. Secure their future. And how would you do it? Just pure term insurance. Nothing else. No mixing things. Pure term insurance. Because if you're not there, someone has to look after them.
Right.
And that will be the term insurance. That's the first thing. Second, look after yourself. Mediclaim. Look after yourself, look after your near and dear ones, look after your parents. So get that done. That's the second thing. Third thing, assess where you are heading. You know that you have saved money, you have invested money, but you don't even know. So review what you have done in these 1 year, 3 years. And if you are starting fresh, at least please fix your goal post. So that's the third thing. Fourth, since we are at the year end, assess a very simple thing. Your expenditure, which you have spent and is futile. And for that you can do just very basic, simple 2x2 matrix. Things which are important and things which you desire. How much money? 2x2. High, low. You should always try and put things which you desire and important. Mostly we end up owning things which we desire and are of no importance. And those are all stacked in our investments and in our house and in our lives. And we should avoid that. So that's the fourth thing. Fifth thing, be very clear of your end objective. So if you're taking a step, in which direction you are moving, in how much time frame you need to reach. So fix that point starting from today. And whenever you get digressed, you will go astray during this journey. But you have to look at that position where you started and where you want to reach and what is the gap. So keep doing this gap analysis. If you do these just basic 5 things, you always will achieve your not only financial goals but your life goals.
Okay, we'll come back to each of those, or some of those at least, more in a more judicious manner shortly. So let me come to you, Kunal. So goal is obviously the starting point. How do you see goals? How do you set goals for the people that you work with? Do you find people very clear about what they want to do, and if not, how do you help them align their goals or create
from
their goals?
personal experiences that we've come across, a lot of times clients who've had a big family, they often do not realize what is their objective even at age 40. They are into their business, earning money, but with no objective as to how much they have to save and how much is required. Lot of goals are turning aspirational more than need based. So aspirational, like travel, buying a car, these things become much more important in today's world. And I just like to add, as Mr. Rastogi said, when he said that you need to analyze your finances, these days credit spends are going on the roof. This EMI fiasco that is there is not helping manage budget, and everyone wants to own a lot of the pie. So when it comes to goal planning, a lot of people are unclear as to they know basic,
right,
that even retirement for that instance is an ignored and an alien concept today. Nobody thinks about retirement.
So where should they begin? So let's say someone comes to you at 40. So what would you tell that person to do first?
First, the idea is start immediately. Anyways, they've lost 20 years of investments, at least 20 years, and at age 40, you need to start immediately. And one of the most important things they need to know is about retirement. Following that, I think education, and somewhere down the line there are certain aspirational goals, so we include travel as well, and something, buying a house. But the need based and the objective driven goals are first retirement, and nobody thinks about that until they are at their 60s, when they realize that they have this much but they need this much. And the longevity of and the life expectancy rising is a worrisome situation across the globe, not only in India.
Right. So let me come back to Siddhartha. You said so term insurance is the first thing that you should do for the people you love, and this thing. So and to pick up that example of someone who's at 40 or late 30s and starting, so assuming, let's say, term insurance you've taken care of, what's the next step that you would recommend?
So the next step,
more specific step, as in.
So the most specific step is you have to look at the medical insurance. So Mediclaim is the next biggest item which you should plan instantly. The third biggest item which you should plan is a debt-free house.
Okay.
There's a next biggest item which you should plan for. If you haven't already planned for one, if you already have one, that's fine. But that's so.
What do you mean when you say debt-free house?
Debt-free house means you should try and ensure that before 10 to 12 years before you retire, because your retirement age can be 55, 58 or 60 or 62. At least 10 to 15 years prior to that, you should be debt free of your house. So you should not be paying any EMIs for the house which you're living in.
Understood.
Because remember, as the technology is going to hit all of us, as we keep growing older, our redundancy will increase, and our ability to generate more income because of our business and profession will keep going down, and hence a debt-free house is a must, and you should try and plan that.
Actually, Siddhartha, you're the first person in many episodes has brought up this very, I talk to people in technology, and they talk about, how artificial intelligence and machine learning is going to throw people out of jobs. It's also going to create fresh jobs, but may not be with the same people.
Exactly.
And this is something in this world people are not necessarily talking about. I don't know whether you've met people who've either lost a job, particularly middle management, or who are trying to reskill themselves.
So Govind, if you look at exactly what happened with the two telecom player merger, right? Some of the senior most professionals, and large part of it, almost 66 to 70%, became redundant.
Right.
For last 20 years, they only had skill set of telecom.
Yeah.
They couldn't get readjusted to any other industry. And fiasco. Now, if you haven't planned for that contingency, if you haven't planned for that fiasco in advance, you have no money to even pay your EMI. Where you left. Now you can be, you remember when you are thrown out of job, the income generation capacity reduces significantly because there are only two options. Either you take a pay cut, which is drastic, or you become an entrepreneur. For entrepreneur, you need some kickstart, some capital, and you need some time before which you can catch up. Now, what do? At that point in time, if you have a huge EMI to pay, very, very challenging.
I had a very similar example on this. We had, unfortunately, a client lost his consistent job after 9 years, and turns out suddenly he lost his job, and he had a huge EMI towards his house, towards his car, and he bought even a holiday home on EMI. The income generation was zero, and he actually had to sell off most of his holdings that he earned and to pay off most of his loan. So things like that are never planned for. How much ever one seems to be ready, but they aren't.
Because and that's the one thing that's changed, right? I mean, if we were having the same conversation 5 to 10 years ago, we would not have been talking about the possibility of a job going, maybe because of technology, maybe because of a merger, and so on. And all of that has become more real.
And
therefore is a critical part in arriving at the 5 mantras. 100%. So one mantra should clearly be, prepare for the inevitable.
Correct. So remember that contingency fund is something which you always have to plan for, and that's why the simple thumb rule for contingency fund is at any given point in time, irrespective of your investments, irrespective of the surplus net worth, whatever you have, you should have availability of 3 years of money in your liquid funds. Always. That's one of the biggest things.
That sounds like a very tough one.
That's a very tough one. But the point is, whatever surplus you generate, you keep adding on to your longer term investments, which ideally should be equity, because in India you can't create wealth beyond equities, right? Because the inflation is so high in a high growth economy. So this is your contingency fund and your safety fund, as well as your asset allocation. Rest you should try and move into the fast growing assets, which is equity.
Right. So one of the 5 mantras you said was having decided on your goal, having decided the 2 or 3 things, which is term insurance, medical insurance, debt-free home, and then some form of investment. I'm assuming debt or debt plus equity.
No, so it has to be, once you have done the contingency fund, then it has to be equity.
Okay, it has to be equity, because that's where the real growth will come.
That's where the real growth will come.
Right. So then you said the next thing is to review.
Correct.
So how often do you review, and in what manner?
So very, very simple. You should review your life and your investments, both. So you should have a financial quotient and your life quotient every 31st December or at 31st March every year, because that will tell you realistically what is your net worth. And it's a very, very simple format. The mark to market asset value less mark to market liabilities value, reduce whatever inflows you have pumped in during the year, you know what returns you have made. Then you can see which investments are dragging your net worth down. Very, very simple exercise.
But if I were to do that today,
right,
and I have investments in, let's say, equity mutual fund, it's looking quite bad, particularly for the last 1 year. So what would I do, or should I be doing?
So I said you should review it. You should not take decision.
Okay.
So what you should do is, for equity investments, you should always take returns, rolling returns, 3-year rolling returns. And that's the best way to look at any investment asset class. So you should take 3 years returns, roll it, as in take the average of them, and then see what have they given. That will keep your mind sane, and that will keep your mind away from both greed and fear.
Okay. What about you? How do you think you should be reviewing? Is there a structured way of review that you suggest?
So a structured way, yes, we do review our clients' portfolios, because usually goals change. A lot of times government policies also change, and that has to be reviewed and understood whether this investment does make sense for this client with a certain objective. But with this happening, a lot of we experience reviewing to be a negligible idea amongst them, because ideally it stems from the fact that the family is only one of the spouses is involved, not the entire family. No one has idea what's happening. And we also came across this one case where the husband was managing everything, and one fine day unfortunate incident happened, and they are running helter-skelter to understand. So my point also to draw out of this is the family should be involved. in that review meeting, maybe it could be 6 monthly or an annually, but the family should be involved to understand what is the finances that are being managed. Like he said, the assets, liabilities, what is happening.
You know, so last week we were doing a discussion with women on Women's Day, and one of the key points that came up was, one is that women should be driving some of it because they need to know.
Correct.
But more importantly, women outlive men mostly,
Correct.
and therefore
Correct.
there's even more reason for them to be aware of what the financial situation in the house is. And yeah, go ahead.
In fact, there is one critical thing which you should do on 31st of March every year, because you have to file your returns and you have to assess all your investments. Just do very two simple things. A, see that the combination of investments are as per the changing family scenarios. So that's one. It will ensure that the transition in case of a mishap is smooth. And you should review it every year, because you may want to change not the investments, but the combination of investments with which premise you have started the investment with. So that's one. Second is, take charge of the nomination. So you can ensure that the nomination, if any needs to be changed because of the change in the life, in one complete year, life can change 100%, right? Hence, you can ensure that that nomination is also rectified.
Right. Okay. We're taking questions as well, and we've got a couple. We're talking about the 5 mantras that you need, and this is a good time to do that because we are on 31st March, and it's the beginning of a new financial year coming up. So Deepak Chatterjee asks, what is the difference between SIP, SWP, and STP? Kunal, do you want to take that?
Correct. So SIP, STP and SWP, these are modes of investment in the equity or the debt markets, usually equity. SIP is systematic investment planning, which simply said it debits a particular amount from your bank account every single month, irrespective. So it's a natural investment habit that you could create over a long period of time, and that could be in equity and debt markets as well. STP is something where like he said, creating an emergency fund. You create an emergency fund in a liquid fund, for instance, against your bank account. When you're creating that,
So what's the T in STP?
the transfer plan,
Transfer plan, okay.
right? So you transfer the funds from your liquid to the equity destination scheme. So one is SIP, which goes from your bank. One is STP, which is transferred from one fund to another, usually from debt to equity. And SWP, this concept is mainly for the retired non-pensioners who probably want something coming in every month. And it's a withdrawal plan which ensures a monthly inflow into your account irrespective of what happens in the equity markets. So that ensures that some kind of flows are coming into the account, and you could either of these you could start, stop and cancel at any point you wish to. So the control is in the hands of the investor, but I believe with this it creates a natural investing habit which one should adopt for.
So would it be fair to say that at a point of time you should be doing all three simultaneously, or at least two of them?
So you can do two of them, but not all three. So systematic withdrawal plan is essentially
Something that will come later in any case.
at the later half of your life or the later stage in your life. But systematic investment plan or systematic transfer plan, you can do it parallelly. In fact, the better way to do it is always to do a systematic transfer plan, because what you should do is ideally get all your money, move into the liquid funds as soon as it hits your bank account. So very simple financial planning again. If you are receiving your salary on 1st or on 2nd of the month or in the first week of month, try and schedule. All banks are now giving this facility to time your EMI. So you get your EMIs to be hit in the first week immediately after the salary credit. You get all your credit card payments, which is immediately after your salary credit. You get all your LIC, all the dues which are need to be paid in a yearly format in the first week. After that, whatever money comes in for your monthly sustenance should all be parked into the liquid fund, so that they start earning relatively better returns than the savings bank account. After that, you can have an STP on a everyday basis, on a weekly basis, or on a monthly basis, whichever way you are comfortable, because now the STP amount is as low as $500, right? So you can plan that accordingly and keep moving on. Better averaging, better frequency, and better returns.
Okay, averaging is something that I'll come to in a moment. Yeah.
So one point I just wanted to add is when you're planning this, we usually plan our SIPs for clients in the first week. If we leave it for the end, so many times we come across instances that there's no balance in the account usually because of these spends that are increasing. So we usually plan
Very
in the
familiar
first
sounding,
week.
yeah.
So this is one idea one should opt for. At least most of your savings should be
Make
done
sure
in
it
the
hits
first
in the first week. Okay,
Yeah.
next question. Tell me about and let me put that to you. Tell me about the best high return scheme. My income is 60,000 per month. I'm a data scientist and I want to own a home in Mumbai for myself in the future. Don't we all?
So with 60,000 that he's planning, he needs to be in a 100% equity oriented scheme, which delivers him alpha, which delivers him returns, a growth rate that is inflation adjusted, and at a rate that supports him over a period of time, irrespective of the volatility. So I think when he's planning 60,000 a month SIP, as we discussed.
No, his income is 60,000 a month.
Oh, okay, sorry. His income is 60,000. Yes. So out of this, at least 40-45% should be saved if we are planning a plan as big as a house. So with
of course, we don't know how old he is, he or she is, but it may be.
But considering if they are
Gen is the
so connecting, we probably are in the 25-30s. But yeah, you usually buy a house when you're in your 40s, 50s. Coming from that area, 60,000 a month, you do a 40-45%. And you're consistent in your investment. So SIP would be the most obvious choice into 100% equity.
Right. So Siddhartha, one of the mantras is clearly to start early and then benefit from compounding or averaging, as you were saying. So give us an example. I mean, I know compounding is very powerful because it's mathematically powerful.
100%. So just to give you an example, if you invest 100 rupees, okay, and if you just leave that 100 rupees or let's take a very realistic example, because that number 1 lakh rupees and 1 lakh rupees, if you have just left it and you are earning 26%, which is a very, very aggressive returns, but if you are able to manage it with a small cap scheme or with a good and clean portfolio over longer periods of time, if you can manage that kind of returns, in 10 years that 1 lakh can actually become 10 lakhs. And if you don't touch, and if this returns continue, then in 20 years it can actually become 1 crore. So the whole idea is, even if that return is not 26% immediately, or even if the returns comes down in good quality equities, in good quality companies, and we can actually see that whole bunch of businesses are growing in terms of PAT, in terms of EPS growth, between 18% to 24% year after year, and there are a whole bunch of businesses, and they have been demonstrating this kind of growth for last 18, 20, 30, 35 years. Now imagine if you would have done this, ultimately you can make 100x in a matter of 20 years.
Right. So, and I think that's a good point to bring in this next question. It's from Neil Bhulawala. He says, can you throw some light on whether debt or equity instruments are good in the current market scenario? So in a way, that painted my question as well. I was going to ask you about how do you look at things in the current market, and you're saying that companies are doing well.
Correct. So first thing, when you're planning investments, you can't change every now and then. So very, very simple. Do you change your jobs every 6 months? Do businesses change their track every 3 months, 6 months? The answer is no, depending on the market. Now elections will happen every 5 years. State elections will happen every 6 months. There would be some or the other bad news which will happen every 2 months, every 3 months, right? There will be conflict, global trade wars every now and then. Do you change your stance every time? The answer is no. Hence what you should look for is businesses which are resilient to these. And once you have done that in-depth study, you should remain invested over longer periods of time. So in this current scenario, my view is very, very simple. If you have a time horizon of 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, anything more than 36 months, equity is the only way you can make money. See, whether you like it or not, India is currently a $2.8 trillion economy, and this is not India has given reports. You look at IMF, you look at World Economic Forums, right, and you are very well aware of it. All international agencies are saying that India will become a $5.2 trillion economy in next 6 years. Now, if that has to happen, they didn't presume that which political government will come.
Correct.
They didn't presume that what changes will happen in 6 years. It's not. It's the demographic and the people who are doing this. So that's one. And this also stacks up, because if you look at the maths, very, very basic, simple maths, $5.2 trillion, $2.8 trillion, we have to add $2.4 trillion in next 6 years, which means I have to add $400 billion every year. Now, current base, your GDP growth is 7%. Add inflation to it, which is 4.5%, 5%. So 11.5%, 12%. 2.85 multiplied by 11 point or 12%, it's $300 billion. With a higher base, it stacks up. So every year, GDP will grow by closer to 280 to $350 billion every year. Somebody has to make that money. You can't make that money in debt. You can't make that money in real estate. You can't make that money in gold. The only way is by buying very, very high quality businesses. Whether you buy it through mutual funds, whether you buy it through direct stock portfolio, whether you buy it through fund managers, does not matter. The idea is that you have to own high quality equities.
Okay. Question for you from Satish. How do you choose an AMC to invest in mutual funds?
Okay, there could be a lot of factors that could lead to choosing an AMC. Ideally, one of the most important factors to see is how consistent the management has been, which in turn means how consistent has the fund manager been in the company and been with that scheme to see the markets going up and down. So a fund manager spending a long period of time into a particular fund would be able to generate returns over times when the markets are falling, and obviously catching up when the markets rise. So ideally, choosing an AMC is not as critical, but understanding the fund manager, which is ideally the most important when you're choosing the fund. And obviously, performances could go up and down at a
fund
particular
managers
time.
could leave as well.
Fund managers could leave as well. So with that point coming through over a period of time, when a fund manager is about to take that path, so we should be able to understand that this person has been delivering returns over a period of time.
So apart from fund manager, anything else like a hygiene factor?
So I would actually look at three very, very simple things: people, process, culture. That's it. People create processes, but organizations which support creation of those processes, even people leave, those processes remain intact. And when you focus on those processes to ensure that the investments are done following that, the investment outcome in longer term will be favorable. Now, what enables all this is the culture.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it would be safe to say that the best performing mutual funds are not necessarily the biggest in terms of corpus, right?
Surely.
So, and that in itself answers that question. So, we have almost run out of time. So, let me get a quick sum up from both of you. And let me start with you, Kunal. So, if you were to look ahead for the year, we've talked about the 5 mantras, we've covered the 5 mantras in some detail. What would be, let's say, the 2 or 3 most critical mantras from your point of view before going on to the next 2?
Correct. I think the most important that you should look at is starting early, which means starting now. The most important idea is you may start with a small amount, but the more time you're giving to your investments is critical, and that actually leads to a greater success in your financial future. So coming to the next point is obviously you seeking financial advice. I think a lot of people these days are understanding that it could be managed by ourselves, but a lot of times things could not go your way, and you need to spend time with an expert, seeking their financial advice, taking advantage of certain aspects which could help save tax as well. So saving tax also becomes a critical point. And I think the third most important is planning for your retirement. We don't see that even when a client has reached his age of 45. We don't see retirement to be an important goal. With the love of children actually coming in India, first is everything for the children, later is everything else, but that later never comes. So retirement is something which should be
and that in some way sort of connects back to your first point, which is start now and start early.
Correct.
Right. Thanks for that, Kunal. Last word, Siddhartha.
Two
or 3 most critical things.
So three.
How did you start investing? What was your first inspiration?
So very, very simple. So I'm a migrant. So I don't belong to Bombay, and as everybody knows that everybody has a dream of buying a house. So that was my first critical thing. So started saving and investing only to ensure that I have a house in Bombay, and that was the first thing. So clearly, fix 3 very, very simple steps. Fix your goalpost, review constantly, and third, ensure that you save first and spend later. If you do these 3 basic things, you'll achieve everything in this Mumbai city.
And you'll have a house like Siddhartha here. Okay. Thank you very much for being with me and on this important occasion, which is a few weeks ahead of the next financial year. And hopefully you will take in all the very, very useful and important advice that both these gentlemen have given. And most importantly, you will start if you haven't. And if you've already started, then it's the time to step up. Thank you very much for being here. And just to tell you that we're going to be back on the 28th of March with the next episode. It's going to be called Being Healthy and Wealthy is Wise. And we're going to talk about how the two, health and wealth, go together. Thank you so much for watching.